Welcome to the castle, everybody. This is Night Saber Z42, and today we'll be taking a look at Sly Flourish's Return of the Lazy Dungeon Master, a very short book about what it takes to be a dungeon master. Prepare what benefits your game. Return of the Lazy Dungeon Master is a book designed to help game masters of all kinds get more out of our role-playing games by preparing less. This book makes use of the experiences of thousands of other GMs to help you focus on how you prepare your games, how you run your games, and how you think about your games. Built around an 8-step process for lightweight game preparation, it covers a wide range of practical steps and preparation activities that will bring the biggest impact to your games. And this is not just for Dungeons & Dragons 5th edition, but pretty much for any game that requires a game master or dungeon master. And this is by Michael E. Shea. This was published originally around 2018. That is the PDF version, but they have actually done a Kickstarter to get the physical versions out, with Return of the Lazy Dungeon Master being in hard copy, which I have right here. So the very first thing that you get is not a table of contents, but a blurb about what the book is, why it was made, who it's made for, and all that good stuff. Probably a surprise to no one, but I actually really do want my table of contents like the very first page. That way, because it's super duper easy just to go from whatever page you are to the very first page, or at least right behind the first page. But now I have to actually do an extra step and actually skip a page to get to the table of contents. Overall, this book can be separated into 4 different sections. You have preparing for your game, you have running your game, thinking about your game, and then you have the appendices, which are just surveys that were conducted around the 2016 year about various aspects of dungeon mastering. So each of the chapters are also very short, usually only a couple pages in length, and I'm actually going to not go into great detail over every chapter, but rather just a summarization of the different sections. So let's start with preparing for your game. The main point of this section is actually how you prepare for a session of any game with a minimum amount of prep. There will always be some amount of prep in one form or another, but the aim of this book is to minimize it between 15 to 30 minutes or somewhere around that ballpark. The Lazy DM presents 8 different steps to preparing your game, a checklist so to speak. You have review the characters, which is pretty self-explanatory. You're just going over all the names and the various aspects of your player characters. Then you have create a strong start. Actually, some pretty solid advice here. It's just about trying to get to a really great start to engage your players, whether it's some sort of a combat encounter or a social encounter. Then you have outline potential scenes. This goes after your strong start, which can lead to some quest or some other narrative. But be warned, you're probably more likely to toss those ideas out the door because, players are a fickle thing and they always don't do what you want them to. Then you have define secrets and clues. This is one of those little world-building tidbits that your PCs might stumble upon, but aren't totally necessary. Then you're going to develop some fantastic locations, also self-explanatory, but these are possible locations that your PCs might explore during the session. Outline important NPCs, also very self-explanatory. Choose relevant monsters, also self-explanatory, but the Lazy DM expands on this further by not making a big deal about matching CR to party levels. If you need to scale things down or reskin monsters, then do so. And there's actually some tips on how to do that in this book. Then you're going to select magic item rewards, and you can have this pre-selected by asking for a list of wanted magical items from your players, or by using random treasures tables from like the DMG or even in one of the supplements for Lazy DM. Each chapter that goes along with the checklist expands on the information and provides examples and some ideas, and it doesn't really take a whole lot of reading in between the lines to really understand what is being talked about here. It's all laid out in a very clear and concise way. There is a chapter on building a lazy campaign, and you do this by building a hook, which is usually just a few words that explain the eventual goal of the PCs. Some examples that they have here are things like defeat the Sorcerer Queen, stop the rise of the Demon Prince, destroy the Lich's dark empire, kill the Vampire Lord, and end her reign of darkness. Things like that. Just like a very quick description that you can give your players that kind of nail what they are going to be doing overall or their eventual goal. So after you do your campaign hook, you're going to define your 6 truths about the world, and they say that 6 is a rather good number for that. And these are just things, world building tidbits that remain true. So, for example, they have a terrible power lurks beneath the village of White Sparrow. The land surrounding White Sparrow grows ever wilder. So, just facts that maybe all PCs would know. Then you define the fronts or the factions that can prevent the PCs from accomplishing their goals. So overall, I found this chapter to be a little lackluster because I myself prefer to have something that isn't lazy, something that's more, grounded and in depth. But I do get what they are saying here. This would be something that's rather quick, or even if you're just a beginner DM, to go ahead and go through this process and get used to it and then expand from there. Because you got to start small before you get big. The advice for running session 0 is actually quite good, even if it is brief. It's all about managing expectations before your players even create their characters. So that's why you went through, your campaign hook and your 6 truths of the world from the previous chapter. That way your players have that expectation about what their characters are going to be doing. And nobody will hopefully be disappointed when, you actually go through with your plan. You'll describe the world that they will play in, provide ways that the characters may know each other, and it is even suggested that you run a quick adventure so that the players can get to know each other and each other's playstyle and characters. I will also point out that at the end of each chapter is a checklist of the facts that were in that chapter, which is always nice. It's just a brief reminder, or if I want to remember what this entire book was about, I would just skim the last page of each chapter and read those checklists. And then we have running the game. From the very beginning, you are given the top traits of a good DM from Survey Sly Flourish took way back when. So, top traits for being a good GM: relax, listen, trust your tools, and sharpen your skills, which means get better at what you do. That's pretty much all there is to it. A lot of this stuff is self-explanatory, I feel like, but it is always good to read it and be reminded of, good practices. Something that I, myself, am going to try to improve on is the group storytelling aspect of the game. And it really starts with having the players summarize what happened in the previous session. This really tells you as a DM what matters to the players and what they remember. There are 3 tricks to group storytelling as well. Like, describe your killing blow for those that get the very last kill of maybe the encounter, or even just the last hit of any enemy. What's an interesting physical characteristic of this monster? That's very good for theater of the mind games where, you have like 3 orcs. So you say, okay, well, what's different about this orc that you're about to hit? You say, oh, well, maybe he's like got an eye patch or something like that. And now you have an actual physical descriptor. So anybody who wants to attack that orc can just say, I want to attack eye patch orc, kind of a deal. Then you have what's an interesting characteristic of this journey. So as you are walking along your journey, have your players describe, okay, what's the banter like? What are you talking about? What do you see? And things like that. What's an interesting characteristic of this tavern? Also kind of rather weird because I am very descriptive of my taverns. I feel like I pull taverns from different books and sources, but if I was going to do something very quick and improv-like, then yeah, that would be a good one. Things that I'm probably gonna start introducing is like, what's a name for this unimportant NPC character, or what's a name for this tavern type of a deal, because I'm horrible at names. But the next two chapters are about improvisation. But again, I kind of find the information lacking upon these subjects because I know that there's a lot more that goes into improvisation, right? But this is just giving you the base. So you have improvising NPCs and improvising scenes and situations. So I'm sure that you could find an expansion on the subject, probably on Reddit or on the internet, or even other books. I think Cobalt Press might have a couple books about being a GM that would have information like that. Something that is important, though, is maintaining the pace. So you should ask questions such as, what do you do to keep the momentum going? And so you would describe the scene, right? And then you would ask, well, what do you do? And that gets the players engaged. It gets them to act right then and there. You can always clarify choices, remind players what their quest is, or of an important NPC that might have forgotten about. And then you can move back and forth between action and relaxation. But do so in a way where it's not always predictable, because going back and forth, your players are going to start to pick up on that. So maybe have like action, then relaxation, or an extended relaxation period in between the action and things like that. Let's talk about thinking about your game. This section seeks to provide you with sources of inspiration to get your brain thinking about your campaign. And out of all three of the sections that actually have relevant information, this is probably the one that I wouldn't really quite use. It's just about inspiration. That's pretty much it. The chapter on lazy dungeon master tricks, though, is well thought out. And, well, for example, you have award levels instead of experience points, milestones. That's a 5th edition thing that pretty much everybody does nowadays. You can improvise ability and skill checks, skip initiative and take turns around the table. So if you don't want to do initiative, if you want things to run smoothly and fast, then you would definitely do initiative just going around the table. You could delegate initiative tracking and other tasks to a certain player. You can use static monster damage. You could assign a rules lawyer. Now that one's very weird for me. I don't think I really play with anybody who's a rules lawyer, and I don't think I've ever played with anybody who's a rules lawyer, but I'm sure that if you have one at your table, you can give them that job and they'll be like, oh, actually, on page 436 of the Dungeon Masters Guide. Yeah. And then an interesting one is to run a low-level campaign. And that's a really interesting one because if you keep it low level, then it's always going to be difficult. It's always going to be against the players to a certain extent. So that would be very interesting. The appendices, as I've described at the very beginning of this video, are just a series of results for surveys that were conducted by Sly Flourish. There's really nothing new here, but it is worth a read if you like statistics and things like that, seeing what everybody's deal is. And of course, there's references and additional reading materials. I don't know why I haven't picked this book up sooner. Actually, I kind of do know why. I've been waiting for my physical copy from Kickstarter for like the longest time. No one taught me how to be a dungeon master. I've picked things up over the years, experimented, learned things from my own profession as a teacher and implemented that, and tried to take things away from actual plays and the like. And for the beginner DM, there is much to take away from this book. There are things that even I'm going to try, that I am going to try to implement in my own game. Should you get this book? Well, get the PDF. But if you are a beginner DM, then yes, there is some good tips and tricks. If you're playing D&D 5th edition, then pick up the others, the Lazy DM's Workbook and the Lazy DM's Companion. And those will probably be added to your DM toolkit, as they say, and you'll make great use of them. That is going to do it for this video. Feel free to leave a comment down below. Give this video a huge thumbs up to support the series, and subscribe if you would like to see more. I will see you guys in the next video. Oh, P.S. The works of Jack Kaiser get an A+ for me.